Judge laughs at homeless man in court, then his identity stuns everyone. During that particular morning, the courtroom was completely full, and the air was heavy with the typical whispers of impatience and boredom. Judge Harold Whitmore, a tough individual who is known for making cutting comments, hardly looked up from his papers as the next prisoner shuffled in. He was known for his cutting remarks. The guy seemed to be in a state of disarray, with his clothing tattered, his beard untidy, and his eyes down. The bailiff made the following announcement. Case number 2471, Mr. Daniel Carter, charged with trespassing and public disturbance. The laughter of a few members of the jury was muffled, and the prosecutor gave a sneer. After what seemed like an eternity, Judge Whitmore finally cracked a grin and glanced up. Mr. Carter, it seems that you have left quite an imprint on the streets of our wonderful city. I am curious as to what you have to say about yourself. Daniel cleared his throat, and his voice was remarkably unwavering when used. Please understand that I was merely looking for a place to take refuge in the old courthouse annex. It was chilly, and I had no misgivings about it. The judge laughed and shook his head in agreement. Oh, the time-honored justification of I was simply trying to remain warm has arrived. Could you please tell me, Mr. Carter, if you break into buildings on a regular basis, or whether this was an exceptional occasion? The gallery let out a titter. At that moment, Daniel's shoulders began to sag, but then something changed. He began to straighten his posture. After being dull for a while, his eyes suddenly glowed with a calm intensity. Actually, Your Honor, Daniel responded in a manner that was composed. I used to own that building. Instantaneously, the laughing stopped. There was a pause in the judge's sneer. Daniel continued, an increase in the volume of his voice. I was Daniel Carter, the chief executive officer of Carter Holdings, 10 years ago. That old courthouse annex provided me with my very first office. It was there that I established my business, which eventually grew into a Fortune 500 empire. The room was immobilized by a startled quiet. The prosecutor's pen fell out of his grasp and fell to the ground. Judge Whitmore's cheeks became flushed. You're that Daniel Carter? Daniel gave a little nod. My whole life was ruined when my business went bankrupt as a result of corporate fraud, which was done by my own business partners. Not just my family, but also my house and my reputation. The system did not work for me, just as it does for countless other people. On the judge's face, he made eye contact. So, yeah, I did spend the night in that structure. Because there was a period when I had ownership over it, it was completely silence in the courtroom. The jurors looked at one another in silence, stunned. Suddenly, the prosecutor seemed to be feeling uneasy. In the course of his career, Judge Whitmore had a moment in which he was at a loss for words. It was a forceful swallow. I am Mr. Carter. I was completely unaware of it. Daniel gave a smirk to himself. Most individuals do not do that. Your Honor, homelessness does not discriminate against anybody. You are not immune to it. It might happen to anybody. However, the judge's gavel did not move at all. He then proceeded to clean his throat after a lengthy wait. Case dismissed. At the same moment when Daniel was about to leave, the bailiff hurriedly opened the door for him. The jurors who had before laughed at the situation now stared in wonder. In addition, a television team was already waiting outside the courtroom, with cameras rolling, ready to tell the world the astounding tale of the destitute guy who had once been a king. This news crew had been informed by an unidentified source. In a few weeks, Daniel's tale became widely known. It was decided to renew the investigations against his previous partners. A documentary was given the go-ahead. Is it Judge Whitmore, too? Due to the fact that it is sometimes necessary. For a guy who has lost everything to remind the world of its compassion, He launched a program that provides free legal assistance to those who are homeless. Almost immediately, the media went into a frenzy. Reporters were yelling over one another as they walked into the sunshine as Daniel Carter went inside the courtroom. He was squinting against the bright glare of cameras. News vehicles were swarming outside the courthouse. Microphones were pressed up to his appearance. "It is Mr. Carter. Is it true that you owned $1 billion in the past? You were deceived by who? Can you give me their names? What's next for you at this point?" Daniel chose not to respond. The only thing he did was stroll past them, his thoughts elsewhere. In the middle of the night, Daniel reached into the rear room of a decrepit shelter and took out a little bag that was waterproof from under his coat. There was a USB drive concealed inside, one that had been concealed for many years. His fingers were shaking as he inserted it into a computer that had been given to the library. Files including emails, bank transactions, and fabricated reports were shown on the screen as it briefly came to life. The evidence. Documentation demonstrating that his former business partners, Richard Voss and Gregory Hale, had stolen millions of dollars from Carter Holdings, falsely accused him of fraud, and abandoned him to rot. But which file is the most shocking? A solitary phone call that was recorded. Richard spoke in a tone that was icy and condescending, saying, "The judge is taken care of. When Carter finally comes to terms with what has happened to him, he will be begging along the streets." Blood began to run cold in Daniel. It had been known to Judge Whitmore all along. In the morning of the next day, rather than retreating into obscurity, Daniel marched back into the courtroom. This time, he did not appear as a defendant. Rather, he looked like a man who had nothing left to lose. When the doors suddenly burst open, Judge Whitmore was in the middle of presiding over another case. There, Daniel stood, holding the USB disk in a prominent position. With a voice that pierced the air like a sword, he made the announcement, "Your Honor, would you be willing to explain why you were responsible for the destruction of my life?" It was a riot in the courtroom. Let out a gasp. Shouts are made. Bailiffs became ice cold. Whitmore's face had lost all of its vividness. Even though he yelled out, "Remove this man immediately," it was already too late. An operative of the federal government who had been given information in secret emerged from the seating area. "In point of fact, Your Honor, we would be interested in listening to what he has to say." As the scandal breaks down after a few hours, in front of the whole country, Richard Voss and Gregory Hale were taken into custody at their respective estates. As a result of his shady transactions, Judge Whitmore was suspended from his position. The identity of Daniel was cleared, and his assets, if any were still blocked, were released. However, Daniel did not go on from there. Reporters anticipated a victorious statement to be delivered during a news conference. Instead, Daniel managed to shock all of them. According to him, "I'm not going to take my company back. I'm going to begin something brand new." He revealed his intentions to establish Second Chance Holdings, a business that would be committed to providing employment opportunities for the homeless, providing financial support to shelters, and providing legal assistance to people who have been harmed by the system. "It is unacceptable for anyone to be forced to sleep in their own abandoned office," he had said. Richard and Gregory were sentenced to 25 years in prison for conspiracy and fraud. After being disbarred, Judge Whitmore was subsequently seen doing his community service obligations at a soup kitchen. Formerly without a home, Daniel Carter rose to prominence as a symbol of justice, demonstrating that there are times when the most powerful person in the room is the one whom everyone underestimates. Many people believed that Daniel Carter's narrative had come to an end. That was not the case. Daniel was sitting in a little office, which served as his new headquarters for Second Chance Holdings, precisely 3 months after his successful comeback. At that moment, an envelope came. There is no reply address. What's inside? Not more than one key and a note. You only discovered a little of the truth. Never in the history of the game was money a factor. The issue was one of control. Moreover, they are not finished with you just yet. The key was suitable for use with a safety deposit box. What's inside? As a list. The names. There are plenty of them. The judges, lawmakers, and CEOs were all involved to something that was referred to as Project Phoenix. The hands of Daniel trembled. This surpassed him in importance, greater than the corporation that he had taken. What's left behind in the machine? Following the failure of Carter Holdings, his former head of technology, Elena Vasquez, had disappeared into the shadows. She was located in a hacker collective on the dark web, and it took many weeks to locate her. Her face became pale when Daniel eventually addressed her about the situation. Her voice was soft as she said, "You weren't supposed to survive, Daniel. Fraud was never ever a concern with Project Phoenix. Everything revolved on getting rid of anybody who posed a danger to their system." A drive was given to him by her. This is how they do it. An unsettling reality was exposed by the files. CEOs who were misrepresented, such as Daniel, were only the beginning. Accidents occurred to people who delved too far into the ground. Is it Judge Whitmore? It is a pawn. Untouchable were the genuine participants in the game. A trap has been set. Daniel went out into the public eye. An event for the press was held. Challenged them to come and get him. On that particular evening, black SUVs surrounding his building. Suit-clad men entered the room. Daniel, however, was not present. Rather than that, he went directly into the Lion's Den, which was the annual banquet of the Hamilton Group, which is the shadow empire that is responsible for Project Phoenix. Daniel was able to fit in among the elite by wearing a tuxedo that he had borrowed from a friend. Unnoticed, he made his way to the platform, where he proceeded to take control of the screens as he did so. There was a glimpse of their personal secrets in front of each and every guest. Using blackmail, killings took place. Stock manipulations occurred. Next, Daniel's voice resounded loudly. "You made an attempt to remove me. On the other hand, homeless people see everything." The chaos broke out. Resulting outcomes, it was before the private aircraft of 6 millionaires could take off that they were taken into custody. During the night, the Hamilton Group went bankrupt and its assets were taken over. Elena disappeared, but not before leaving Daniel one last note, which said, "They will find their way back. Prepare yourself." While Daniel was standing on the rooftop of his previous firm, he watched the dawn. He had triumphed, for the time being. However, on the streets below, a fresh face was observing him. It was a young lady who was whispering while holding a burner phone. "Subject Carter is still doing his duties. Proceed with the second phase."